Welcome to today's session on how to give everyone access to Revit models and increase productivity. I'm Florian Alami, and I will cover this topic with you for the next 30 minutes. Today's session is intended for those of you who are new to Visicon or have not yet had a chance to fully utilize its basic Revit model review capabilities. This session is being recorded and will be made available to you in a follow-up email. I'll start out by reminding ourselves why we're motivated to provide better model access and its benefits. Next, I'll go over the steps of how to get a Revit model into everyone's hands on a project. Then I'll review some of Visicon's basics that will allow you to fully explore any of your project's Revit models. And then we'll conclude the session with some time for questions. Just as a quick reminder, Visicon was created to provide a common model review, checking, and comparison platform for your various project models. Everything I show you today applies equally to all model types. However, today we will focus on how to get more out of your Revit models. Okay, assuming the architect and structural engineering offices are using Revit, each project delivery process relies on multiple representations of the same information. So at a minimum, you have the architect's Revit model, your analysis models, and a separate Revit model that represents your structural design. Unless you're the type of office where the structural engineers are highly proficient in Revit and do all of their own modeling, I found most engineers underutilize the intelligent 3D information that's built into every architect and structural engineer's Revit models. I've even experienced many engineers that tell me that they're using Revit, but when I actually look at how they're using Revit, all they're doing is just opening up Revit and looking at the individual sheet views. So that's not really taking full advantage of the 3D, let's say, clarification capabilities that Revit has. So why is this the case? First of all, not everybody has access to a Revit license. Secondly, Revit is not an easy program to use, and despite the fact that Revit is a really brilliant program to be able to capture project information in 3D and produce construction documents, it's really not set up to be a model review solution. So it's too heavy. You have to worry about which versions of models you're using, and at the end, it's just difficult for you to take full advantage across your project team of all of the valuable information that's in there. And what we're trying to do is just set up a scenario to make sure that everybody on your project team does have immediate and easy access, in particular to the Revit model. So here we're talking about the architect's model and the structural model, so that ultimately you're making more informed and faster decisions, right? That's really the key. And I know in my experience, I mean, the offices that I've worked with closely, those that are most productive are always, the actual structural engineers are using and can easily themselves reference the architect and Revit's structural Revit models. And that's not always the case. And that's hopefully what I can show you how to do today. So as a next step, we're going to go into kind of hands-on, modeling the rest of the session. And we're going to start in a Revit model and then just go from there. So let's go, and I'm going to open up a Revit model. So I've picked a project where I have a structural and an architectural Revit model. The hypothetical situation that we're working with here is that I'm the structural engineer, and it's my responsibility to build and maintain the analysis models, essentially complete the design, while I have a separate team that's creating and documenting my design in Revit structure. And the architect is also using Revit, and so there's an architectural Revit model as well. Now, granted, I have access to all of the PDFs, but I want better access to the underlying 3D model, especially when it comes to trying to verify and coordinate more complex conditions of the project. So to get started, how do you get the Revit model information into everybody's hands using Visicon? One person in your project has to start out with this Revit model, similar to what I've done right here. Once you install Visicon and you have Revit on your machine, it will have installed this Visicon plugin. You see the plugin right here? So it adds a ribbon tab. On the left side, you see export. So what you would do is you would go to one of your default 3D views like I've done here, and you will go export. You have several settings to be able to export. The two things I always focus on is if you're trying to export objects that are not visible in your view, switch to false true. And if you have linked files, which means if your architectural model is already linked to this structural model, and the setting here is true for linked file export, then automatically both files will be exported into into Visicon. Excuse me. So as the next step, you just say save and export. This will just take a second. What's happening in the background is Visicon is now exporting 100% of the geometry and component attributes into a very small and efficient Visicon file. Once you're the person who's, let's say, charged with distributing this, the Revit information to everybody on the team using Visicon, and you've gone through this extraction process, you would then go to File, Save As, and you're going to save this project file. So I went ahead and created a folder for today's session, and we're going to call this webinar Revit model. Yeah, excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to go to that folder that we just created, right? So this is how you get started. So when we review this particular project, what I want you to see is here is the structural Revit model that we just had opened, and you can see it's just a little over 60 megabytes. We just created a 100% copy of that Revit model without losing any of the information. And I mean, structural models in particular, our compression is really good. It's less than 300 kilobytes. So that makes it really easy to email, access at all times. We're going to access the architectural model, but just to save time, I already went through this extraction process. It would have been identical to what we just did for the structural. I want you to see here, we have the architectural model. It's about 444 megabytes, and the model in Visicon format is less than 11 megabytes, right? So this is our starting point. Let's now go to the actual model itself. So we're going to reopen this where it said Webinar Revit model. And then what I'm going to show you on this one and the architectural model, how to do a quick cleanup so that the end user gets the model in exactly the view that they want to see. So the way you work with Visicon, so this is, just using the free viewer at this point. I'm coming in here, any object that you select, you have access to the full properties on the left. So for example, if I select this roof slab, you can see that it's an 8-inch concrete slab, and it has all of its other relevant properties here. All of the instance properties are here. So even if you're not a Revit user, you can follow the same thing here again, right? I'm selecting that same roof slab. You can see that it's an 8-inch concrete slab. All of these properties that your BIM department is putting into Revit are accessible to you in the Visicon version as well, right? So that's under here, under these parameters. On the right side, we've pre-organized your information for you to be able to quickly access the items. So here, I'm going to go to the list of components first. And what I can do is just start selecting each of the various component types. And so what you can see, for example, there will sometimes be things like these annotation boxes, etc. If you don't want that in your model and you think it's getting in the way, just simply select the category and hit delete. So we're just deleting this box here, right? So now that's cleaned up. So I am left now with just my primary structural components in this model. We go further down and I can see what levels they're assigned to, what material is assigned. So here, for example, I can see that the steel elements, right under material, if I organize by uses, these are the steel elements that have been assigned the color red, and all concrete is a gray. So that allows me to quickly look at the various components. Unlike the Revit, right? So here, if I wanted to cut a section or navigate, yes, I can navigate a little bit like this, but it's still not that simple and straightforward to do it. So what we're going to do is just spend 2-3 minutes just going over the basic navigation capabilities of Visicon. So you can see this orbital. The default is wherever you click and you depress your left mouse button, that becomes your center of rotation. So you see it's that simple to be able to rotate it. I want to come look below, and for example, there's some transfers at this lower level, and this allows me to quickly come in and explore what that geometry looks like. How deep is this transfer beam? I click it, look at the properties, and I can see that it is a 46 by 104 beam, right? You see the dimensions there. Here's the length, volume, and under the family, this gives you the exact dimensions that are specified for this model. You'd be surprised, every single customer that we've ever worked with, once the structural engineers actually start validating the Revit model and comparing it, not just relying on the 2D drawings, you'd be surprised how many modeling improvements or just simply modeling oversights they find in the projects themselves. So for example, here, I can see that there's a column that's probably at the wrong elevation, right? You see that bigger column should probably go to at least to the soffit of the upper slab. So this is something that as a structural engineer, without being a Revit expert, I could highlight and then comment or pass on to the BIM team. How do I make a comment? I can simply right click, add a view, either create a new view including only the selected object or all visible objects. We'll do all visible objects. So now that was our default view. We now have a new view, and I can now come in and do simple things like 2D markups, annotations, and measurements, right? So this is how I can now quickly annotate this information. I send this information back to the BIM team, right? So instead of taking a screenshot and saying, oh, this needs to be changed, I would email this small Visicon file with the annotation back to the BIM manager and say, hey, by the way, I have some markups for some areas that need to be changed. That person can select, using Control Select these two, as long as they have the original Revit model open, like I do here, they would be able to come in and just simply, with those objects selected that you've highlighted, right click, you see where it says Autodesk Revit Interactivity. We can say temporarily isolate an active view or create new selection box. We're going to do create selection box. Just simply reactivate your Revit model, and you see that column has already been selected, and I would be able to come in here and now make that adjustment, right? You see here, this column needs to come up to that level. It's that effective how you can increase and improve the communication between the markups or the comments that your engineering team is trying to pass on to the modeling team, right? So that's just a quick, simple example. And let's go ahead and cancel out of this, go back to Visicon. So that's markup. We're going to go back to our default view. Navigating, again, you can, for example, right, I'm just kind of using my basic navigation. Under home, you have different options. You can also do a walk. So this would allow you to almost like do a building inspection. This goes through the project and including gravity. So this way you can actually, it's as if you're visiting the job site and can do an inspection and walk your way through the project. The architect has a question, what's the minimum clearance that I have here? I go to my measurement, clearance, I'm going to create a new view, include all objects, and I can respond to the architect that the clear height is 9.065 feet. What's the clear distance between columns? I go into clearance, again, touch that, and it's 34.833 feet, right? So that's how easily I can come in and make a measurement. We're going to go back to our default view, go into our standard navigation. And in this particular project, I'm working on some lower level coordination. You see, we had all these transfer slabs and we have all these ramps. I want to understand how the various levels are connected. So I just simply tap on the top of a component or any face, right click, add a clip plane. See that? Add clip plane. This allows me to very easily come in and be very detailed about coordinating and understanding, right? I can grab this widget, move it to where I'm trying to understand exactly where, let's see, yeah, so here I just need to bring this a little bit further down, right? I re-click to set that as my center of rotation, bring this over, and can come down and can see exactly what the size of these walls are. So for example, I can confirm that these are modeled as 8-inch walls, right? So I zooming out, again, you have very easy ability to be able to navigate and zoom, create and maintain multiple views of your project. So that's looking at the structural model. But I said we were going to also encourage your engineers to feel comfortable accessing the architectural model, because I think that's where it's really the most productivity gains are done. So we're going to go back to our folder, and we're going to pick up where you would have ended if you had done the architectural model export from Revit. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go, and this is what I'm calling raw. This is what the architectural model would have looked like if we would have exported it from Revit. And I'm showing this on purpose because I want you to be able to develop the skill and comfort level with being able to quickly clean up the model once you export it. This particular architectural Revit model, as you can see, has a whole bunch of sample components, or maybe not even sample, balcony areas that are down here. There's some other components out here where they're setting up sample apartment units. So we don't want any of this to interfere. It's really simple to clean it up, right? Remember, we went to this list of components. First thing I see is it still has these boxes, so I'm just going to delete those boxes. Then you just use your right-click mouse, just like in AutoCAD, right, or Revit. This, if you do the right to the sweep to the left, it only selects components that are fully enclosed. If you do the sweep to the right, it picks up everything that it touches. So we just start deleting the extraneous components out of the model. That's just taking a second here to clean that. Yep, so deleted that. And you see how when we delete those, it's clear, it's reducing this little underlying grid. We want that grid to be snug underneath our model. So there's still some components floating out here. So I'm just going to grab those in that space, delete those. You see how that rubber bands down, and we're going to grab all this garbage that's down here and delete those as well. We've now, within less than a minute, we're able to clean up this architectural Revit model to get it to where we can use this as a reference model. I would now go and do File, Save As, for example, and we'll just call this our architectural webinar model. Similar to what we did before, I come in here and I can now navigate through the model. We have all of these different color modes. So for example, here, let me just close some of these things. So we have all of these various color modes, and it's still, why is it not? There we go. So we're going to go to our material color mode, and we want to, again, we said we're working on this lower level. So I walk into this area and something catches my eye. Do you see that there's this transfer beam right here? And the architect clearly has not, there's some support or something missing in the architect's model. I can come in, again, similar as we did with a structural model. I'm just going to tap the top of this column, add a clip plane, and would allow me to then come in and also understand exactly how the architect has set up the space below. And I can see immediately that the architect's model is still missing some columns and supports that we need here. So I want to be able to coordinate and compare my column location with where it falls into the architect's model, because that's a step of coordination that I can just quickly do myself now using Visicon, right? So again, the bottom line is the same. I can click here, what is the architect assuming for element types? You can see I have access to the component information on the left. On the right, you have all of the lists of components. And then really you're using these various clip planes. So here, this is a clip plane that way. If I want to cut another section here, I select the front of this wall, add a second clip plane. So you can add up to 9 clip planes per view and combine those, right? So this gives you a nice view or section of the structure if you're trying to figure out, for example, how your structural system will interface, let's say, in this mezzanine area with a double height ceiling, right? So this allows you to very quickly go in and explore even the architect's model. We're going to switch back to the structural model. And there's one thing that I wanted to highlight here that I find is I'm going to go back to my default view, get rid of this clip plane. There's one thing that I always find is very useful for the structural engineer as they're going through different cycles of working with different, updates of the Revit, their own internal Revit models, is switch to this. You see here where it says families, switch to the family color mode. What that does is it gives you an indication of where the modeling team has used different families to define components. You use that with a combination under visibility. We make it really easy for you to isolate different component types. You see, I can turn everything off and only turn on my slabs. This allows me to quickly come in and verify that the Revit model actually has the slab thicknesses that I intend in my design, right? So these blue ones are 8-inch slabs. So all of these blue ones are 8-inch slabs. The balconies are all 7.5, and I can do a quick visual inspection and see that all of the balconies have the same family assignment. This level is a 10-inch slab. Then the brown is a 9-inch slab. And I can see that even at this side, that 10-inch slab switches to an 8-inch slab, right? So this makes it really easy for you to be able to isolate and see where you have consistent modeling done in the model. Again, and you need no Revit expertise for this at all. I do that by isolating slabs. Then I might go in and just isolate my columns. We might turn on our slab. So this, you can very quickly see where you have different column sizes, right? So these two are the same. These are 18 by 24s. This green one is different. It's an 18 by 32. It's not that straightforward to be able to see that if we're back at the Revit model. They're all kind of pretty much the same color. Granted, you can configure Revit to color code all of that, but you need to be quite an expert to be able to do that. So now, as our last hands-on component, we said there's an area at the bottom where we want to coordinate our supports with those of the architects. So we're going to close these two models. We're going to close that one, and we're going to close the architect's model as well. And what we're going to do now is we're going to merge the two models into one Visicon session. So I'm just opening up a new Visicon. We're going to open up our folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that architectural clean one. The clean one is the one where I had, removed the boxes and all the extraneous items. Use Control and grab our webinar Revit model. That's the one that we actually created ourselves today. So we're going to drag these two at the same time into here. Synchronization just simply means if I had multiple views in each of the respective models, if I synchronize all views, the architectural elements would be added to the views of my structural views. And so if I do no synchronization, it just means that each of the views only retains the components from their original models. So now we have two models. And what I'm going to do, and actually notice that in my architectural model, I had turned everything on. So now we're looking at work, right? These are the list of the two models. I can assign each model a color. So let's go ahead, and this one is our structural model. Let's make our structural model yellow and keep the architectural model blue. So you have the choice of color coding the models based on their model designation, or go back to component color or material color, right? So here we can see that this is that same exact architectural model we were looking at. With the difference, let's find the entrance. Where was the entrance? I think the entrance was on the, here we go, on this side. We can now see that the column is actually in place, right? We're going to come in and we're going to add a clip plane. And we're going to come scroll all the way down. And now, without having to bother the modeling team or rely solely on the CAD file or the PDF files, I'm going to go to my model color mode, right? Remember, our structural model is yellow. The architect's model is blue. And I can now, using the clip plane widget, go up and down and very easily verify. See, this is the missing column in the architect's model. And this gives me a nice view to see where my columns, my supports are falling within the architect's model in a way that is much more versatile and usable than even if I'm, using Revit and merging and linking the models in Revit. This gives everybody on your team the ability to, in a very light and fast fashion, go ahead and make those changes, right? Come in, and then I would be able to make, let's say, an additional measurement here to determine if we're going to create a new measurement. For example, if I needed to move the column over a little bit, right? Because my spans are too long above. So that provides hopefully a good and motivational overview of the benefits and how a structural engineer can become more productive if they have this simple, easy access to these two models. And what we encourage our clients to do, and those of our clients that are the most productive and are able to equip their team members to make quick decisions, are those that have these simple files always available. The models are always open, and the structural engineers are zooming in and out of the models, both their own Revit models and the architect's models, essentially answering most of their own questions very effectively. So with that, let's go ahead and just conclude. Right, so in summary, what are the benefits that I showed? Small and accessible file size, your Revit version independent, so no more stress of having to worry about, oh, I just got a Revit model. If I double click on it, is the wrong version of Revit open, and I spend half an hour waiting for it to upgrade or turn it off. So it doesn't matter. Once you convert the Revit model to Visicon, it will open up. There's only it's version independent. I showed you how easy it is for you to explore your model, and again, this is really what allows you to equip your team to just make faster and better decisions. And I gave you an example of how you yourself then can just go in and just quickly do some simple coordinations. And those teams that we have enabled with Visicon are making faster and better project decisions. With that, that ends the formal session. I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that you may have. You can go ahead and answer or type the questions into the comment section, and I'll just go look at the sections right now. Perfect. Okay, so the first question is, how does this work with the other file types you mentioned earlier? So that first slide that I had, which showed the IFC, I would say that's probably the most important. So that would be, like merging in a Tekla steel model that you're getting from the fabricator. Everything that I showed you would work just exactly the same. The second item is, your ETABS models. The E2K is navigable in exactly the same way that I showed you, as well as the adapt INP files. So it works universally. And let me see, I'm just trying to access these questions. Hold on. The interface is not very good for me to see. Hold on. I'm trying to, this somehow the questions, can't read them. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So now I see the questions. Apologize for that. So it says, how to stop the rotation of a clip plane if we accidentally touch the end of an arrow? Oh, yes, that is a very good question. Let me demonstrate. What they're referring to is, you see this clip plane widget. The widget has 3 areas. You see how I hover over it? If I click, you see how I've highlighted the shaft? That moves it up and down along its primary axes. If I click the end, you have this rotation right here. What they're referring to is, how do you stop the rotation? You use control, and control locks it at 5 degrees angles. You see how using control, I can bring it back into that vertical stage, right? That's how you do that. And if I'm zooming in, I grab the tip of it. For example, I want to, let's say, really be detailed about this area here, and I don't want to lose that widget out of sight. I can just bring that, and that gives me then really fine detailed control. So hopefully that answers that question. Next question is everyone required to have a paid license to use Visicon? The answer is no. To create views, additional measurements, markups, and run the advanced analyses like model comparison, clash checking, and all of those other things that we didn't cover today, you need a license for that. However, you don't need a license to be the end user to just open and view a model that somebody else has already extracted, right? So that answers that question. Then the next one is, can multiple people be in the same Visicon model? Unfortunately, at this point, you cannot. So each person is viewing the Visicon model, or their copy of the Visicon model, independently. So that's something that we started working on that feature. It's something that's on our roadmap, but yeah, that would definitely be nice to, or even if it were, the way we're looking at it is like Bluebeam has that what we call asynchronous collaboration or coordination. So really everybody, if you're in Bluebeam Studio, you're not actually real time looking at the same document, but Bluebeam essentially copies your markups and behind the scenes is updating different people's views. So we're thinking about doing something similar to that. Perfect. With that, I think we've almost gone 5 minutes over our session with questions and answers. So again, I see there's one more question. Let me just answer that. Which file types does it support? So the file types are, let me just pull up that. Revit We have a plugin. So as I showed you, you would export a Visicon VXF file from Revit. IFC is self-explanatory, so that would be Tekla, Vectorworks, SDS2, Steel, those types of things. Point clouds. Then we have the eTabs, and we have adapt. So eTabs would be E2K file, and adapt is the IMP file. The adapt is used to coordinate the post-tensioning cables of projects. Perfect. So that's it. And with that, again, thank you everybody for your time, and I'll formally close today's session, and we'll send you a follow-up email with a link to the recording so that you can share it with others. Thank you and have a great day.